Hey everyone, so in this video we're going to take a quick look at how I'm going to make the battle system for my upcoming turn-based RPG. I have no idea when it's going to come out. I really only just decided in the last couple of days that I was going to start this particular project. I realized that I've purchased enough assets from the Unity store to have a sufficient library as far as visual effects and 3D animated models and backgrounds and textures to actually make a meaningful game. It'll still be small scale. We're not talking Final Fantasy VII here, but it'll be a small scale turn based RPG. So let's take a look at how we're going to do this. So, first to understand is that Unity breaks projects down into scenes. I presume you know that already. So your battle sequence, it's going to be just one scene, but that one scene is going to dynamically load in the backgrounds and dynamically load in the levels based on certain variables that you're going to track. So whether you have 10,000 or just 10 battles, it's going to be the same scene over and over again. You don't have to recreate it. So unless you have a battle that has some really unique functions, you're not going to have to create a different scene. One scene to rule them all, at least for battle. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is a new scene. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a GM object. A GM object is really just an empty object that you attach scripts to, and those scripts control the overall flow, the overall events. So, and just to be clear, this is just going to be the actual, say, casting of spells. We're not going to get into UI. That in itself is an entirely different discussion, because then you have to decide as far as what works good for the player. So what UI is good for the player, as well as gives them good feedback and things like that. This is just meant to be the core functionality of your player casting spells on the enemy. So dynamically loading the backgrounds, dynamically loading the enemies, and then being able to control spells. Also, it's effectively from a first-person point of view because we're not going to have an on-screen avatar yet. This is the first draft, so we may eventually get into that. So we've created our GM object, and we're going to put on our battle flow script. As you can see, there's already some variables here, so let's jump into that script. So battle flow. So first you have public transform, enemy 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'll explain in a minute why I named it like that. By making it public, that's what makes it accessible in the inspector. And then you just give it some kind of meaningful, consistent naming convention. Next, private int, so it's an integer, R&D choice. We'll get into what that is for a minute. And public transform floor 1 and 2. So right now, I'm only going to just use two backgrounds just so you see how it works. But whether it's just a floor or an entire building, functionally it works exactly the same way. You're going to use a variable to decide which one gets loaded in, which brings us to public string battle location outdoor. And actually, let's make this static, because this is going to have to actually come in from an outside source. So this one line you may wind up putting somewhere else, but because it's static, you'll still be able to access it here. But for the purposes of this demonstration, we only have one scene, so I have to put it here. Okay, so in the start section, this all gets done before a single scene displays on the screen. This basically is making the first scene, the first frame, excuse me, the first frame, not the first scene, the first frame of the scene. So R&D choice is equal to random.range 1, 5. So this number here is inclusive, this one is not. So in other words, your potential results are 1, 2, 3, and 4. Why? Because it's Unity. The first number is included, the last number is excluded. Switch, R&D choice. So it's switch, parentheses, and then the variable that you wish to make a decision based upon. And then it's case, and then the value. So if this were a string, this would be in quotes. It's not, it's an integer, it's a number, so it's not in quotes. So it's an actual number we're looking at. So again, if it was, say, battle location, we'd have to put the potential results in quotes. So case 1, instantiate enemy 1. Okay, why is there only one argument? Normally, when you do instantiate, you have what is instantiated, where it's instantiated, and the rotation of what's instantiated. If you're using both the default position and rotation of the object that's being instantiated, you don't need to enter those. So in other words, this is identical to So there you have the three arguments: what's being instantiated, where, and its rotation. But since we're using the position and the rotation of this object, you don't have to do that. Break, that's required because it tells the switch statement to stop. And then rinse and repeat. Case 2, instantiate enemy 2. Case 3, instantiate enemy 3. Case 4, instantiate enemy 4. If you want to pause the video so you can copy that down, that's the only downside to me not typing this out in real time. You need to stop the video. Now, I just want to throw this out there as a hypothetical. I would like to find a way to be able to use a single instantiate command. In other words, you don't do switch, you don't do case, you just do a single instantiate that says instantiate and then has quote enemy end quote plus R&D choice. In other words, you're trying to dynamically create this name. Enemy plus this is the one that gets instantiated. It's not a coincidence that I did 1 through 4 and then use a range of 1 through 4. I couldn't make it work though, so I don't know if it isn't possible or if there's an extra step. And the reason why it doesn't work is this here is an object. If you do quote enemy quote plus and then something else, in this case R&D choice, that's a string. And Unity says can't convert a string to an object. So if there's some way you can dynamically create this name, let me know. Put it in the comments. I'll be glad to do a video about it and give you credit. But if you could do that, then all this would go away and you would just have a single line that says instantiate enemy random choice. So I just want to throw that out there. And if I figure that out in a later video, I'll update. So again, this is just looking at the result of random choice and then instantiating the corresponding enemy. Now here is using the battle location. So this decides which enemy is being instantiated. This is deciding which location is being instantiated. Now, whereas this is being done internally based on a random range, this is based on an external factor. In other words, where are you? You want to have the environment that's being instantiated correspond to the environment that you're in the overworld. Now, some games, old games, but like Phantasy Star, it just had like a grid background. It didn't care where you were in the game. And even still old games, but not as old, Kudelka did a similar thing where no matter where you were in the environment, it just kind of had this faded gray background that you're on. I think you could see like floor or something, even if you were outdoors. I don't think it dynamically changed. So just want to throw that out. So that's kind of a stylistic choice as to whether or not you even want there to be whether you want there to be dynamically generated backgrounds or dynamically selected, not really generated, selected backgrounds. And that's about it. So that gives us our decision as to what background is instantiated and what enemy is instantiated. So now we just have to link these. So this is not saved, I could tell because there was an asterisk there. And now we just go to our GM object and we just link these. So it doesn't matter which enemy I'm using. I've decided that all these will be fine. Enemy 2, enemy 3, enemy 4. I believe this one should be floor 1 and this one is floor 2. And I think that's about it for that one. We have a second script, which I'm not going to review quite yet. Let's make sure that the enemy instantiation and background instantiation is working. So there's an enemy and it's on ground. There's a different enemy, it's on ground. Same enemy. Different enemy. Okay, so we know the randomization is working. Now, it was on ground because it was set to outdoor. So we'll just change that to indoor, which means this one being instantiated because battle location is equal to indoor. And we'll just run this a couple more times. Sure enough. Okay. And again, all I'm loading in is a floor. That's purely just so you get the idea. Rather than just being a floor, this could be an entire environment that you've loaded in. As long as it's like a single model or a single prefab, which could be a combination of models, then that will work. All right, so let's look at our second script. So I added a second script and I attached it. Well, I will attach it. I should say I haven't attached it yet. Now, you can attach multiple scripts to one object, and there's a couple of reasons why you do that. The most easiest, or I should say the most basic reason why, is just to make it clear which one handles which functionality. So rather than having this monolithic script with like thousands of lines, you could break it down into several scripts. It also would keep you from having to rewrite. Maybe you have, rather than having functionality that is written in multiple scripts, you can consolidate that functionality into one script and then add that one script to all those objects. So in other words, maybe you have collision detection on the hero, collision detection on the enemies, collision detection on something else. Well, rather than embedding collision detection into all those scripts, you consolidate it into one collision detection script and then apply that script to all of them. And that also means that if you make a change to that one script, it then changes all those objects. So like I said, there are several reasons why you would do it. And all right, so let's keep going. So we have the caster script. And I didn't actually put it on the object yet, so let's drag and drop it there. You can see there's a fire attack and a water attack. Let's just go ahead and assign those because I've already explained why that works, but we'll take a look at the code. So I don't know if I mentioned at the beginning, this is effectively currently first-person mode, again, kind of like Phantasy Star, because we don't draw the enemy, we're not drawing the player, excuse me, we're not drawing the player on the screen, and so the enemy is just facing the screen. This is very easy to change. You would just rotate the camera, put in your playable character, and then, handle the animations there. It's not like you have to start from scratch. All right, so this script simply creates variables for fire attack and water attack. Again, calling it public is what makes it accessible in the inspector. And then we're just checking for keys. We're saying if input.getKeyDown is the number 1, then instantiate the fire attack. And we're using 000 as the base, like all the enemies spawn at 000. The center of the floor is 000, so everything is basically predicated upon 000. Now, if we eventually add multiple enemies, which we probably will, then this will have to change. We'll have to add something like where we click on an enemy, and then based on the when you click on something, you can grab its location, and then you would instantiate based on that location. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. That would be a separate tutorial. I suspect what I'll do is, if you guys want to see more of this, I'll do a UI tutorial, and then at that point, we'll then have a multi-enemy tutorial. And then just rinse and repeat. Input.getKeyDown2, instantiate water. Now, I really want to impress upon you that this is just rinse and repeat of this. And the reason why I say that is because I've had numerous examples where I said, here's how you instantiate one thing. Here's how you instantiate a second. Here's how you instantiate a third. And then I stop. And I swear to you, someone already says, hey, how do you instantiate a fourth? Not trying to criticize them, but it's like I've already shown you 3. So it's just rinse and repeat, and I think that maybe I'm not conveying that this is functionality that can be repurposed, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So all you're doing is you're changing what the key input is and what object is being instantiated. The overall process is the same. So if I have not forgotten anything, I believe that's all we need for the spells. So we got that enemy, that background. If I hit number 1, sure enough, a fire is made. Doesn't look like that great. It really probably needs to be in front of him, so might have to tweak a few things like that. So for the fire spell, let's put that maybe at -1. I think that'll put it in front of it. Not going to muck around too much with that, since this is just the broad strokes. There we go. So that's in front of him. So you'd probably do something like maybe scale that out bigger, or you could instantiate it multiple times around him. Again, this is just the basics. And I don't think I called it out earlier. The visual effects are from Magic Arsenal. I recently picked that up on sale from the Unity store. I think it's still on sale, 50% off. And the enemies are Downrain DLC. I've picked those up over the last few months for the previous game, Town Guardian, that I've made available on itch.io. Okay, so now we want to check the water attack. That one is like an aura and it's under the enemy, so we probably don't have to reposition that one. So that's number 2. Yep, kind of the opposite problem. That one's like a little bit too big. So again, you might want to scale that down. I'm really just using the defaults that come with these asset packages. So that's just about it. That's really everything I want to cover. So now you've seen how to dynamically instantiate backgrounds. So the environment's dependent on where you are in the world. Dynamically instantiate enemies. Now, this does not constrain where you are in the world, because usually depending where you are in the world, you also have an enemy range. So you'd really have to create a new variable. So just as you have a variable to track where you're indoors or outdoors, you would have a variable to track that as well. And these numbers, rather than being a constant, would be variables. So rather than 1, 5, it would be a, a plus 5. So in other words, a and then 5 numbers above it, or whatever. So you could use whatever variable name you want, and that variable would also be static. So basically, this tracks where you are. You'd have a second variable that's static that tracks what enemies should be made, and that would give a value to A. So if this is A and A plus 5, then whatever that is, it would get set to, rather than 1, it'd be set to 12 or 17 or 22. That way you have that range. So like we said, A comma A plus 5. So if it was A was 12, then it's 12 comma 17. But again, since it's variables, you would just put the two variables there, A, and then whatever the range is. I used a range of 4, 5, because that's excluded. I think that's about it. I was going to show you how to control the animations, but that's highly specific to the objects you're using, so the models and their animations. I'll probably get to that when we have a more complex battle system. That way we can show the enemy is idle right now, but that way we could show how the enemy would be damaged, and then how the enemy then plays their own attack animation. So that would make this for much, much longer and really kind of get out of the scope of the basic thrust of instantiation based on certain factors. Okay, so I hope you found this useful. If you like this, please leave a like. I don't get many likes, but that would really let me know if you want me to continue. I can't tell you how many times people have said, hey, how come you didn't continue the series? And it's a series that's like 3 years old. It's like, well, because no one cared about it. So please do leave a like if you enjoyed this. Please leave a comment if there's something you want to see. As I said, I do plan on making a full game out of this. Probably the longest part will not be the design, but trying to make some kind of cohesive story, because to me, that's always been a very big part of RPGs. While most games have a story now, once upon a time, the good stories were really only in the RPGs. My opinion, but I also go way, way back. So, again, hope you found this useful, and please enjoy the rest of your day.